This is the Amidon Planet Podcast, episode 60. I'm your host, Joel Amidon. Thank you for joining me on this never-ending quest to figure out how to teach better. Today on the podcast, we're being thankful. It's a time to be thankful. You know, it's always a time to be thankful, but just we're taking a little extra time today to be a little bit more focused on it, but more intentional about being thankful. And I also like to think about it being grateful for things, being thankful, being grateful. I think those are synonyms. And so thinking about our lives and the gifts we've been given and how we can just if you start listing them off and listing on all the different things that, you know, you have in your life that you're like, man, I'm kind of thankful for that. Like I got a nice coffee cup here and these little purple marker. I'm just looking around my little office here. I'm just thinking all these books that I've had a chance to read, or a book that's been given to me, or the learning that was represented from the author that they don't even know that, hey, I'm really appreciative of this book. And the fact that I have it in my hand, I'm just thankful that they put those words down into a book. Like, look at this book by Jon Acuff called Finish. I can think of a couple lessons that I've learned from that book that I'm very thankful for. Just even thinking about, like, there's a learning from that book as I bring it up, just about your goals, and like that your goal, you set the rules for your goal. Like, he'd have a goal of like reading 100 books. And, you know, the fact is he would count audiobooks, he would count comic books, he would count, what's another thing for comic books? Graphic novels. That's it. He'd count graphic novels. People are like, well, does that really count as reading a book? He's like, hey, it's my goal. I get to set the rule. And so thinking about that, think about the intentionality we have for our lives, the goals we have for our lives. And we set the rules for our goals. Or even to think like, take a goal and cut it in half. And be like, hey, you hit that goal. And maybe you didn't hit the overall goal that you wanted, the full goal, but you hit half the goal. And that's more than zero of the goal. And so I'm thankful to Jon Acuff for giving those learning. And then I see this other book, Peak, by Anders Ericsson. I know that Sam Gilbert, who was on my podcast when we were talking about teaching math as agape, and then we also talked about grit, she recommended this book. I've not read it yet, but I'm looking forward to it. But I look at and I'm thankful that Sam was thoughtful enough to think like, hey, I think Amidon would appreciate this book. And so speaking of former students and now colleagues that are recommending resources and are just a pleasure to work with, I got another colleague that's going to be on the podcast today, Dr. Kristi Livingston. And she's a ball of energy. She has got a fantastic attitude. She is just a delight. She was a delight to have as a doctoral student here at the University of Mississippi, and now she's a colleague, and she's got a lot of experience. She thinks deeply about teaching and learning. And again, one of the reasons why I'm thankful for this podcast is being able to have discussions and thinking back again about all the different discussions that I was able to have, and then also to share with folks. I mean, thinking about the conversation I had with my clinical instructor, Joe Dye, just thankful to have that conversation, share it. And then also thinking about like with a former mentor and Erica Halverson, just a few weeks ago, got to have a conversation with her. The fact that she was willing to share time with me when she was launching this book that she just had coming out, and thankful that she'd take the time to have that conversation with me. And like, this podcast becomes a platform for conversations. And, you know, sometimes I remember as a kid, I was, you know, at gatherings when my parents were having conversations. It's just fun to listen in on conversations, be able to listen in and learn about like how they were talking about situations. I remember my dad used to have a conversation with a local newspaper editor about politics and stuff, and I would just be like a fly on the wall, just kind of listen in. And that's really what these podcasts are. So I get to have a conversation with Kristi Livingston, and we're going to talk about a number of things. We're going to talk about, one, she's just a great resource person. So the fact that we're talking about a resource that she's recommending, the book Powerful Teaching, and we'll talk about that. We'll link to it in the show notes in case you're so intrigued that you want to purchase it. We also are talking about the Enneagram, and we've talked about the Enneagram before in this podcast with Nancy Bartelt, but we're talking about it again from a teaching perspective as well. We always are talking things from a teaching perspective, but just kind of a free-flowing conversation about a couple things, but really it's just the time to be thankful. I'm thankful for you taking the time to listen to these podcasts, trying to get better at it all the time. Love getting to share people like Kristi with you all through this platform. And we're going to take a little break. We've been kind of pushing out an episode a week for since October, which was the month of Joel. And I think, we'll do a push and we'll put out an episode a week, and it just kept going. And I think we'll take a break next week, but hopefully that this episode finds you in a good place. Hopefully you can maybe spend some time with some family in the very near future. And we look forward to putting out more episodes. Got some good ones coming up. So stay tuned. So without further delay, before we got to do the disclaimer, right? We're having some books. We're going to be talking about a couple books. The links to the books, to purchase the books, will be in the show notes. And that's to the Amazon Planet Bookshop, which is linked to Bookshop, which is supports independent bookstores. So if you want to support those small businesses, that's great. That link will take you to there, so you can support them online, or just go to your favorite bookshop, your favorite local bookshop. I mean, here in Oxford, we have Square Books. They're not a sponsor, but I love it every time I go in there. I just get inspired to read something. So support those local booksellers. They do some good work. Anyway, now without further delay, here's my conversation with Kristi Livingston. Dr. Kristi Livingston, thank you for coming on to the Amazon Planet podcast. How are you?
I'm good. I feel like this is the part I'm supposed to say I'm like a long-time listener, first-time caller,
That's
old
right.
school radio shows that they used to have back in the day.
That's
I'm
right.
excited to be here.
Did you have a radio show that you would listen to?
No, but I had a best friend that we used to make our own radio shows on those
nice.
little tapes. We won't go into all that, but we were going to be our own recording DJs one day.
Oh, that's great. I used to record music videos with my friend Jake Schneider. We used to use Weird Al Yankovic as like a main source material, and we would just lip sync it. And yeah, it was.
We were obviously the cool kids in high school. Obviously,
obviously, and yeah, now we get to talk to each other. And so, before we get too far into this, yes, we have a fairly long relationship here through the School of Education here. But could you just take a moment to introduce who Kristi Livingston is to the audience here?
Sure. Kristi Livingston. I've been in education for 14 years now. First 6 years, I was an intervention specialist at an elementary school for K through sixth grade. Did reading and math. That was like my original path. I got my bachelor's under math. And then when I got my master's, I was focused in math, and then kind of got in my heart and soul that I really wanted to get a specialist in literacy. So ended up getting my doctorate. It's been a few years as a literacy coach and a literacy professional development trainer. 5 years as a team lead, like a boss of a bunch of adults who did professional development around the state. I know, feels weird to still say that. And that was a really cool experience. Got to lead a lot of people through math, science, ELA, professional development. And currently I am a literacy consultant for the North Mississippi Education Consortium, and I do some adjunct work for the University of Mississippi.
Nice. So, and I guess the genesis of this, is that a good word? Yeah, probably a good word. Well, I'm just kind of blown away initially from the math, starting in the math world. I just didn't know that. That's why we have these conversations. We just kind of.
I can talk about the concrete pictorial abstract approach.
Oh my gosh!
Is that your math love language?
That's right.
And then it about ends. I can do subtraction with regrouping, and that's about as far as it goes now these days.
I'm in my happy place right there. All right. So, but we wanted to have and here's the thing. I see you as someone who's always connecting to ideas. Like you're reading things, you're hearing things, you're always seeking out information. We just got done with a book club, and it was like, hey, have you seen, there we go. We just read The Dream Keepers by Gloria Ladson Billings, previous episode of the Amazon Planet podcast, but we talked to her. But anyway, through those conversations, through that book club, you're like, hey, people thought about this, or putting something in the chat. Here's another resource. And I know that if you come up with a recommendation for something to read, and you talked about this book, Powerful Teaching, which we'll get to in a second, and I haven't had a chance to read it, but I'm like, if I'm limiting the content that we talk to on the podcast to just stuff that I've read, then I'm in trouble, because it's hard to read all this stuff. And so that's why we lean on each other, right? We're smarter together. But also too, right. We wanted to talk about a little bit about the Enneagram as well. And we've got that book too. You got your book there, The Road Back to You. Bam, there it is. Because I'm a big fan of it. It's helping me, especially now we're in our fall semester. senior students. They're dealing with a lot of things. They're dealing with stuff and the stress and sometimes having an idea about how people view the world, which the Enneagram kind of gives us, is a way to like provide some insight on how best to help them versus like, I'm just going to speak to them like they see the world the way I see it, which is not true. So we're going to talk about the Enneagram. We're going to talk about powerful teaching, and I think we just talk about, you just have, again, a lot of insights on teaching as well. And so again, you're very energetic and have lots to share. So here we go. So what do you think? I mean, so going back to the Enneagram, like, why did you want to talk about this book? Why was it something that you're like, hey, this is something that I'd want to bring up and talk about with regards to teaching?
I will say this book for me, because I was just introduced to it, I guess, like the past 2 or 3 years from a very respected colleague I had when I was working at the Department of Education. And she was leading a huge team of literacy coaches, like 100 people. And she said for them, it helped them find common ground, how to build better relationships with people. And so she was the one that came to me, and she didn't tell me right out what my Enneagram was, but if anyone knows me and if they know anything about Enneagram, they know I'm a 1, which means I'm a perfectionist, which means I just need all the things to be done right in my life. Like, that's all I ask. I just want everything to be perfect. And so when I first started reading this book, that's when I was the supervisor over a team of like 13, 14 people. So we all read it together, and I started like making these like immediate like connections, first reading about myself, kind of figuring out, ooh, is that how yes, that's how I see the world, but is that how I'm coming across to other people? And I'm like, oh, that feels icky. I don't want to come across critical and judgmental. That's when my intention is I'm trying to help you be better. But it helped me realize like the way I see the world is so different from other people. Even on the front of my book, I know the podcasters can't see this, but there's a list of all the people that worked with me. Oh, wow. And I had all of their Enneagrams and their wings written down. So I knew when we were having conversations or working on projects together, I could take a step back and say, okay, this is my perspective. This is how I think it should be done versus how they see the world and how they kind of fit with the project and fit with where they're at. So for me, it was a huge moment of growth and clarity, but it also helped me build more authentic relationships with people. And it was almost like a running joke. Like the 2s are the helpers. If you're a 2, you're a helper. And I had 2 on my team, and they would always say, look, I'm a helper. Just tell me what to do. I don't know what to do until you tell me. But when you tell me, I'm going to help you. So for me, it helped me build such better relationships.
Yeah. I mean, because that's the thing. I mean, you're all coming together, and this is, again, thinking about teachers, you're coming together wanting to provide the best education for kids. Right. And we all have this common understanding, but again, like you said, looking at the book, and again, the book is The Road Back to You, an Enneagram Journey to Self-Discovery by Ian Morgan Cron and Suzanne Stabile. I think it's Stabile. Anyway, he's got a new book coming out soon, I think. I'm pretty sure I saw that as a
pre-order. Add it to the list.
Add it to the list. But then having these different ways of viewing the world, and then being able to have, again, common language. So like, I was going to ask you, but I could have guessed that you were a 1 from
I'm
our
really
interactions.
fun at parties. I'm like, you could have set up the table differently. Right. Everyone wants to be my friend, obviously.
These napkins don't really match. That's okay. But just having like that perspective of, hey, I'm noticing this. It's, if that's something that you need to make this better, like I'm here for that. But also too, and I don't know if you'll do this, when I'm interacting with somebody because like I'm always willing to say, hey, here's something you could do to make it better. And I'm like, do you want me to exercise that role, or do you want me just to listen? Because I'm here just to listen if you want. And that has been helpful in certain conversations, especially with my daughter right now. She's a teenager or almost a teenager. Like having those conversations and be like, hey, do you want me to listen, or do you want me to provide some advice or insight or whatever? And she'd be like, just listen, Dad. I'm like, okay, I can do that. So
my 8-year-old, she's still developing into her personality, but I can see like some parts of 1. And me and my husband were actually talking about this one night. He's an 8. I'm a 1 wing 9. So that means I'm a perfectionist, but I don't like to tell people, like, I don't want to have drama or conflict. He's an 8.
The peacemaker, right? Is peacekeeper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I don't want any of the drama or the conflict. He's an 8 that likes to push buttons. Like he's a challenger. He enjoys and it stresses me out. But we were talking about it one night and she asked me, Mama, what are you? And I'm like, I'm a 1. That means I want everything perfect. She's like, oh yeah, you do. That's why you say something if I make a 94 on a test. I'm like, thanks. I'm obviously really killing this mother thing too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's another role of teaching.
Keep you humble, right?
That's right. Yeah, exactly. So like you're talking about this from the perspective of a parent, but you're also talking about the perspective of a leader of teachers, but then a teacher of teachers, but then also you have your experience as a, teacher in the classroom as well. I mean, how do you see the Enneagram being helpful to you in your teaching? So
in my current position, working with student teachers who are in the schools, working with what we call here at the university, clinical instructors, who may be very similar to them, but may also be very different from them. I think we think a lot in pre-service programs. We focus on the teacher-student interaction, how we teach, how we assess, how we engage, remediate, develop classroom culture. But I don't know if we talk enough about the success of any teacher is also grounded in the culture of the school. And the culture of the school is built on the relationships those teachers have with each other and on the whole faculty, the whole staff, the relationship you have with the cafeteria workers, the principal, the counselor, everyone. Are we all here and are we all, with the same vision? And are we able to respect and understand that other people in our building see things and do things a little differently than we do? So I actually have it kind of on my unofficial agenda for the spring after they've done all these UBDs, all these assessments. When they're just full student teaching, I'm going to have my team complete the Enneagram assessment and have just a conversation with them really quickly about, okay, well, that's how you see the world, but know that your clinical instructor may see it differently.
Right. And
just understanding you have to find common ground, but for them to better understand themselves and how they approach teaching versus how someone else might.
Yeah. Well, even to see too, we're still in the midst of a pandemic. Hopefully we're coming out of it. Like how people operate out of stress and things like that. And the Enneagram offers some insights in that as well. And where, all of a sudden somebody might, flex into different phases or different kind of descriptions of the Enneagram based off of whether they're in stress or not, which is, I think is very helpful for me. Like I'll be a little bit more playful when feel like I got things under control, but if not,
you must be a 1 as well.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So in safety, when we're at our best, we go to a 7, which is kind of when I read about the 7, I'm like, I want to be a 7. They're so carefree and they're spontaneous and they do fun things. Yeah. I want to be that person.
That's right. And we both have a fondness for Disney World. I think for me, I love Disney World because I can do all the budgeting ahead of time and get it all down. And then when we go, it's all just, hey, you got your treats, we got our meals, we got everything planned. Let's just go, and footloose and fancy free. Where you want to go? You want a Dole Whip? Fantastic. Let's get one.
It's in the meal plan.
That's right. That's right. It's in the plan. It's in the plan that I perfectly designed. We're ready.
I love it. I love knowing at this time we need to be at this ride and at this time we have this ride. And my husband's like, you're taking all the fun out of what a vacation supposed to be.
That's right. One more time and It's a Small World. No. Sorry.
But the time, the wait's only 5 minutes. We can do it one more time.
So I guess this knowledge of the Enneagram, and again, we've done a previous episode on Enneagram here with Nancy Bartelt, but how does the Enneagram help you best operate in the world? And then we kind of talked about your interactions here with teachers and other folks, but I don't know, how does it help you?
Well, I think in terms of this book, one of my favorite things, I think you mentioned it a second ago, is there's actually kind of this chart that they have for every number. And it says, okay, when you're a 1, this is you when you're at your healthiest. These are what you look like. This is how you exhibit that. This is when you're average, and this is when you're unhealthy. And I don't know if I ever thought in terms of what does it mean when I am not in a great mental space? What does that really look like, not just for me, but to those around me? And so it kind of gives me those indicators, this is something tangible that I'm looking for. If I start feeling anger and resentment because the trash didn't get taken to the street by my husband or something. Like something so small. If I am finding anger and resentment in those things, I know, okay, it's a time for me to step back.
Mm-hmm.
I need to call up my therapist and have a conversation. I need to stop trying to juggle so many things. It reminds me, like, I got to walk away from all the things I'm trying to perfect, get back in a good mental space so I can be like the best. Cause that's all what we all want to be. We all want to be the best versions of ourselves. So it kind of helps me see where I need to be. And that's one of the great things that this book does.
Yeah. And I think, and again, just barely scratching the surface of anything here, but for people to get the book, especially, we live in a relational world where we're dealing with other people, and to be able to see yourself in the best light and be able, like what you just said, just these recognition factors, like, ooh, that's in a bad spot. Need to reevaluate, need to step back here, need to not put my critiques on somebody else and think about how can I be a healthier version of this. But to look at something like this book and seeing like, hey, how can I become, like you just said, the best version of myself out in the world, and just getting that, knowing yourself better, knowing each other better, building better relationships. And then for the fact that we're being teachers, if we have healthy relationships around of adults around children, we're going to offer a better opportunity for them to be in the best environment to learn. So
absolutely. Like I would recommend it to any like admin, like as a book study with their team, just so they can all get to know each other better. And it's such an easy read. Oh
yeah. It's scary the first time you read the descriptors of your Enneagram number. It's like, oh, wow.
Oh, I'm fun. I'm pleasant. People must love me.
That's right. But you know what? Also, too, I'll tell you that just before we jump into the other talking about powerful teaching, is I'm working with somebody right now who is a grad assistant who's a 1 as well, and it's like we're humming because like we kind of see the world and like taking care of things, and we're all on the same page, and it really helps out. But on the other side, having someone who is different than working with me before, it wasn't still a productive relationship, but just knew like, oh, they want things a little bit differently than I do, and I just need to be clarified. And it helped. It helped the working relationship. So that was good.
I kind of use it as like my excuse now. I'm a 1. I can't. This is who I am. I apologize. Right. It's just, I love you. I will build a great relationship with you. But I'm also, I think one of my student teachers wrote on my evaluation last year, Dr. Livingston has high energy, but really high expectations.
That's right.
I was like, I'll take it. I'll own it. That's okay.
Yeah. A good follow on Instagram is Ian Morgan Cron, the author of the book, because he'll offer every now and then, like, the Enneagram for blank. And next 9 days, he'll go through whatever it is and kind of give descriptions, like little bites of learning. So in case you're not wanting to read the whole book, but it's out there. All right. Speaking of books, this is one that you keep talking to me over and over again, and I need to get it. So Powerful Teaching. So tell me about the book Powerful Teaching and why I should read it. Oh, there it is. Oh, yellow cover too. Stands out.
People on a podcast can't see every time I'm holding up a book, but
and what's the subtitle?
Unleash the Science of Learning.
Fantastic. Okay.
I'm trying to remember how I even came across this book. I don't even know. Like, it's just one of those books that like completely changed how I do instruction and how I do assessment. So engaging students and even adult learners. I've done a lot of professional development over the past several years, and working with adults. It is different than working with children. We call it andragogy. It's when you're teaching adults. What does that mean? But it focuses on what true learning is. So it's not just, sometimes when we think about when you go into a classroom, are kids learning? And we think, okay, well, is the teacher putting information in their heads? And then we kind of just stop there and we're like, okay, so they're watching a video, they're getting information in. I'm giving a lecture, they're putting information in. And I think when we stop our view there, that's where we're kind of missing the whole mark, because this book clearly defines learning as being a 3-step process where, yes, we put information in, we put new information into our heads, but then we store it, right? You're either storing it long-term, short-term, you got to hold on to it.
Right.
But the way to keep it in storage, the way to keep it long-term is to practice what is known as retrieval, which is simply just pulling in information out. So I'm going to use you as a guinea pig. Didn't even practice this before, but Dr. Amadon, what did you have for dinner last night?
I had bratwurst.
Okay. What did you have Tuesday last week?
No idea.
No idea. Right. So and that's like simple information, right? You're just naming a food. It's not complex information, but because you haven't had to think again about what you ate Tuesday a week ago, you didn't store it. It's not there anymore because you haven't had to retrieve it. Now, if I ask you next week again, what did you have for dinner on Thursday night of this week? You might remember because I've already asked you. So the more you have to pull information out, the more likely you are to remember it long term. Mm-hmm. So thinking about when we work with kids, especially in a pandemic and leaving a pandemic, not just from week to week, or year to year, but our kids went to a bathroom break and they came back. Do they remember what we did right before we left for that bathroom break? And, being intentional about having the kids tell you, what did we just learn? Asking very specific questions to make them retrieve it so it sticks.
And it probably makes sense too, like retrieving it in different ways, different contexts, so it's not just this, I'm just imagining a pathway, right? If it's down the same, we're like, oh, what if I have to go around the corner here? So if I'm just, either regurgitating something or using it in constructing something or whatever, doing some sort of making of things or a solution to something, that it would seem like the different types of retrieval would also help things, maybe. Mm-hmm.
And I always just give people the example of if you meet someone, pre-pandemic at a party and they're like, hey, my name is Joe. Okay, Joe's an easy name to remember. Nice to meet you, Joe. But you don't see Joe for 3 weeks and then you run into them at the grocery store and they're like, hey, and you're like, hey, you. And you're like, you have no idea what their name is because you haven't had to retrieve it. You haven't had to pull it back up. So your brain didn't store that information long term.
Wow. Yeah. So that's the kind of the basic thesis of it. So what are some key learnings you've had when in just overall in reading the book?
So while I was reading it, I will say it's written by someone who's a cognitive scientist,
Who's
someone who Pooja Agarwal and Patrice Bain.
Fantastic.
But one was either a 5th or 6th grade social studies teacher for years and years and years. And then Pooja was working on, studying all things about the brain, and they partnered together and did research together in this classroom to see, using what all Pooja knew about your brain, what can we do to better help these 5th and 6th grade students understand long-term these historical concepts that we're teaching. But while I was reading it, they give very practical strategies oh, you want to try retrieval in your room? This is what it could look like. And it's any content area, any grade band. I mean, it's things I do with myself now when I'm trying to remember something easy. Thankfully now we have phones. We can type everything into our notes to remind ourselves. But if it's something simple, there's these really basic things that I do in my classroom. One that I love, it's called retrieve taking. So it's like note taking. But if you think back to, I don't know, the last time you've sat in a seminar and someone's talking at you and you're trying to frantically write down everything important they say while also listening for the new information without actually taking any of it in, right? You got too many things going on. So the purpose of retrieve taking is tell everybody pens down, pencils down, computers away for the moment. I'm going to do a 5 or 10 minute mini lesson. This may be a video, whatever it is. I need you to look for these key items. But having the kids fully engaged in the learning and then saying, okay, now we're going to pause. I want you to go to your notes and I want you to add X, Y, Z. So it's giving them an opportunity to be fully present in whatever the new learning is before they go and try to write it down. So you're pausing and giving them time to retrieve what you just said, kind of flip it around and put it in their notes in a way that makes sense to them.
So it's prompting them to notice some things, giving whatever the action is, could be, your little mini lecture or a video or whatever. And then giving them time to say, all right, now write down these things that you saw.
And I would say as a teacher who, we talk about accommodations all the time. What I do is I actually use guided notes. Mm-hmm. So I'll have fill in the blanks for what I want them to know. And I'll say, okay, now go to number 1, fill in those blanks there. And it'll be key organized notes for them that they can study later. But it's giving them an opportunity to pull that back up and put it, down on the paper that they want to take notes on.
Well, go ahead. No, keep going.
I was gonna say another thing I do in my class, and I work with university students, and I have to say this at the very first class, and it's in my syllabus every year, and say, you're going to have a quiz every week. It's going to count 5 points. That one quiz each time is 5 points. And it's only worth like 10% of their grade. It's very low stakes, but letting them know at the beginning of every class, we're going to have what's called a quick quiz. And it's either going to be over the reading you did, the week before, or a previous lesson, but it may be something we even learned week 2. Like, we're way into the semester right now. But one of the things I might ask my students in one of my ELA classes is, what are the 3 key shifts in ELA? And because it's a very important part, them knowing, finding evidence, background knowledge, like all those things are very important for them to know to be successful in my class by the end. So they know if I've pointed it out and it's on a quick quiz, it's probably coming back later. Yeah. But giving them that opportunity each week to pull back up knowledge that maybe we haven't talked about in a few weeks.
Right. And I'm more and more, and this is coming at a time where I'm recognizing I need to be spending more time on vocabulary of my, of what's important in my classes. Right. So we talk about messy tasks, open-ended math tasks, but then we also talk about, like a lot of formative assessment and summative assessment, and even the differences of them, and like having them have definitions and what they actually mean helps them figure out like, well, what does it actually look like in the classrooms that they're in? Because all of them are in different contexts. They're from kindergarten class to a 6th grade. It could be math class, could be any different subject areas that they're being placed in. But then trying to have them like think about what these things look like. If they don't have a good solid foundation in the vocabulary of what we're talking about, I think I'm doing them a disservice, and that's what I'm recognizing. And so like even having these, a way for them to retrieve this knowledge in ways, and knowing that, hey, if we can get this cemented in there, they're going to be better off when they go forward and can talk about what makes a quality formative assessment. Oh, I know what it is. Now I can tell you what it actually looks like. So yeah.
And so I will say that's what a lot of my quizzes are with literacy. It's vocabulary heavy. You have to know the difference in phonological awareness and phonemic awareness and phonics. And it's these like words that you don't use in your everyday life. And so the quiz is actually I'm not asking them for the definition. It'll say, here's a task. Here's something a teacher did with a student. What does that align to? So it's them having to pull an example and then connect it. So we're continually quizzing, but with as many models and application pieces as we can.
Well, and that's really important in this state too, because I'm assuming all of that knowledge that you're giving them is also on their
Foundations of Reading tests. Yeah.
Foundations of Reading tests, which I've heard stories about, but something that they definitely need to have. Yeah. So if you're going to you have the book and you had a copy of it, you're going to slide it across. You can slide it across the table to me or somebody else. What guidance would you give to somebody in reading it?
I would say just have a pen and a notebook handy, because like mine is highlighted to death at this point. Yeah. But it'll give you things that I'm like, you can pause and say, I'm going to go try this next week and see if it works. Like one thing I do on my assessments now, on every single test I give, my final question is always, now tell me 2 things that you've learned so far in this class that are not already on this test, or create your own question that is not already. Always some type of retrieval opportunity for them. So it'll give you tons of just ideas, like you can go do this tomorrow. And most of them are zero prep. And we're always looking for, what can I do to make this big impact that's not going to require me to spend 20 hours planning, right?
Right. Yeah.
Like an exit ticket could be, let's do a complete brain dump on concrete pectoral abstract approach. Write down everything you know, you have 2 minutes, or write down 2 things you remember. You can just be very intentional about how you have students retrieve. So if you're gonna be able to get this book, I mean, it's so good and it's so practical. Just have a notebook ready to write down all your ideas.
Nice. And I, sometimes when I hear about books, and what makes me nervous sometimes is somebody in in a school of education that's, not in a lot of classrooms, and they're writing something like, here's how you should engage and teach. But what I like about this one, what you're saying is this is a partnership between, someone who's acknowledging like, hey, there's some expertise that's existed with this teacher in the classroom. And then the classroom teacher says, hey, there's some expertise with this person that has a great understanding of the brain. Let's come together and then let's figure out what that looks like. And we're going to actually, it sounds like, use this stuff in the classroom as well.
And that's exactly how they write it. Like you'll see who the author is in each section. Like, this is Patrice, and I'm going to give you an example of what this looks like in my 5th grade class. And it'll be Pooja. This is what it looks like in my university class. So you're seeing both of their perspectives in a way that can help you connect like deeper to the content that they're telling the story with.
So I know I gave you a challenge. So can you sum up powerful teaching up in 7 words?
Have you listened to me talk? I can't do anything in 7 words. I said retrieval is just exercise for the brain.
Nice. Very good.
I'm proud of myself there.
Oh, yeah. Well,
and I know summarizing.
Well, I know too, like you always have resources that you want to write. So could be something related to what you're doing. Could be stuff you're doing at North Mississippi Education Consortium, anything to promote. So anything you're like, hey, here's another book you need to read, or here's some resources, or here this opportunity is. What do you got?
I think if you can, buy both the books. I don't know when this goes live, but Christmas is around the corner. It's great to add to a wish list and have someone, right. Everyone wants educational books for the holidays.
Yeah. Well, you know what we've done? It was with the Road Back to You. We brought it to holiday functions and pass around. Let's figure out how we can
analyze you.
No, I just figured, hey, everybody identify what the Enneagram number is. And that's been a good conversation. If you haven't seen
it is.
Yeah.
I do think like if we could share with them a link for them to take the quiz, if that's something they're interested in, and being able to, there's a free version I can send to you. I would also say if you look up Powerful Teaching, I can't think of what their website is, but I'll get it for the show notes. But there's a website they have that you can go and check out, and they have tons of like templates that you can use, like 1-pagers that kids could write on if you just wanted to print and have those ready. Also, I guess just promoting myself, I do offer a session called Make It Stick that I do PD with teachers, K-12, and kind of teach them how to use some of these practices in whatever they're teaching. So, North Mississippi Education Consortium, you can contact me and I'll come hang out with you virtually or face-to-face.
Nice. Okay. So basically you've taken like kind of the learnings from this and put it into something that people can actually participate in as a teacher through. Oh, okay. So that was a little joke we had, because like you were talking about Make It Stick, and I thought I heard Made to Stick, and I'm like, oh, that's a great book by Chip and Dan Heath. I'm reading it right now, and she's like, no, it's not. I've
never read that book in my life, but we can talk about it.
We can talk about it. Doc. I could sell you on that book, but yeah,
that's what happens when 2 people that have a lot of energy and are Enneagram 1s have a conversation. You get you get part of it.
Exactly. Well, thank you. And we'll put all those resources in the show notes. This is great. I love this conversation. I'm sold on Powerful Teaching. I'm going to go pick it up, and we can maybe have another conversation later.
Sounds good.
Well, we will have a conversation. I mean, we work together.
Obviously. So.
Thanks, Kristi.
Thanks.
I am thankful for Kristi Livingston. Just so good to be able to have that conversation and being able to share with you. And again, that's part of the thing from this podcast is I'm thankful to have the conversations, and I'm also grateful to share them. And I'm thankful for anyone that listens to them. So really appreciative of everyone taking the time to download. We know what's cool is about podcasts is you need to make an active decision to hit play, to find the episodes, to find the podcast series and hit play. So I'm appreciative for every time someone makes a decision to do that. And again, what's cool is more and more often people are making that decision to hit the play button. So we're appreciative every time that you choose to do it. And hopefully we keep putting out good content. If you're ever looking to provide some feedback, I'm thankful for that as well. You can send me an email to JC. Not JC. That's my personal email. How about Joel at AmazonPlanet.com? Joel at AmazonPlanet.com. You can reach me and we can, get some feedback on, hey, maybe there's someone I should be talking to or something we should be talking about that you're like, hey, this would be good. I got some feedback from a former student, Paul Newman, not that Paul Newman, but Paul Newman. If you're listening out there, thank you for him because he signed up for the Amazon Planet email list, where again, we're trying to revamp that and putting out free and easily accessible professional development opportunities for professional development. I think that's the best way to use that platform. And we had some ideas about some things that maybe can come down the pipe. So thank you, Paul, for sharing that. And if you also want to join the email list, you can do that. Go to AmazonPlanet.com, hit any one of the email buttons or email list buttons. There's plenty of them on that site. You can also, if you want to support the podcast, subscribe wherever you get podcasts. So that could be the subscribe button, the follow button, whatever it is. wherever you find podcasts. You can also rate and review. That's also great. And then also to share. So if you find an episode very helpful, if you're like, hey, man, someone should hear about some of these resources that Kristi just mentioned, or you want to share something from an awesome clinical instructor like Joe Dye that we had a little while ago, any of those things that you want, any of those episodes that you share, and again, those get noticed and we see the plays and that says, hey, this is the kind of content that people are finding pretty helpful. So we're trying to be responsive there. So go ahead and share it as well. You can also follow at Amidon Planet on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, or like the Amidon Planet Facebook page. You can also check out the Amidon Planet store for that Be the Good swag, or Amidon Planet Bookshop. Links to both of those things can be found in the footer at amidonplanet.com. You can also, there's also links usually in each one of the show notes. So the show notes for this episode will be amidonplanet.com/episode 60. I also got another couple podcasts out there if you're interested. We've got The Teacher's Journey, Mile Markers on the Road to Better Teaching. That's sponsored by the School of Education at the University of Mississippi and also an Amidon Planet production. We also have Teaching Math Teaching. That's if you're a math teacher educator, that's an awesome podcast where we're getting kind of advice and expertise from experts from around the country in all different roles of being math teacher educators. Some of them are at universities, some are at professional development organizations, some are in local school districts. So if you're a math teacher educator or a teacher of math teachers, go ahead and check out the Teaching Math Teaching podcast. And then we're also going to have coming up another episode in the Transition Years podcast that I did an episode earlier with John Staley. We're going to have another one that's going to first launch on this feed, on the Amidon Planet feed, and then it'll also be on the Teaching Math Teaching podcast feed. So lots of stuff happening in the Amidon Planet podcast network, but just thankful for all you out there. Thankful for all the cool things that are happening and looking forward to more cool things in the future. So thank you for listening. Thank you to Kristi for sharing her time and expertise. Thanks to Matt Mifflin for the music in this episode. And finally, a big thank you to all of you out there who are seeking to teach better and be the good in the world by investing in the lives of others. This world is a better place because you have decided to use the gifts you have been given to serve others. Thank you for all that you do. Peace.